Hello everybody, it's The Worm, and I'm back with Raging Loop. Last time was a pretty incredible discovery. we we finally got to learn the secret of the old man, which is something that has just been up in the air for the entire game. So it is satisfying to finally learn the truth about this guy. We were about to get his whole spiel, so we're going to be diving into that. But before I do, a couple things I want to address. Just a few, well, this first thing is kind of minor. Last time I was saying how I was a bit incredulous about the old man being alive and yet being the criminal from that case long ago. Let me see. Yeah, so Serial. I don't know I don't know where the emphasis is. That said that the journal mentioned that it was about 60 years ago. So it might have been, he could be in his 90s at this point. And even that, this is going to sound very strange, and I don't know how this happened. Some wires must have got crossed in my head that shouldn't have gotten crossed. For some reason, this was World War II, right? The first feast, the first modern feast, was during World War II, and these serial murders occurred shortly before then. I don't know how I got this mixed up in my head, but for some reason, when I heard right before World War II, or even World War II, somehow my impression was that of like the turn of the century, almost. And that doesn't make sense, because that's about a 40-year gap there between the beginning of the 1900s and, when World War II happened. So somehow in my brain that got screwed up, and so I was incredulous because I was thinking, how in the world can this guy still be, not just alive, but somewhat active? So no. It's not as crazy as my initial impression made it out to be. So I don't know how I got that mixed up. Second thing I wanted to talk about, I believe we were having a discussion. It was I was talking about how Haruaki, he hid in the outhouse, and so that first time he got passed over for a role, not in the feast at all. And let me see here. So Lise, KKCT, and The Cool, always nice to see new commenters here, all had pretty much similar things to say about that, in that the Miguruma probably just missed him. And I guess I'm willing to believe that. It's just, I don't know, I think I hyped it up a bit too much in my head, the idea of this sort of omnipresent surveillance system. And so I thought, well, if there's cameras and there's locks everywhere and it's all electronic, and I was thinking surely they wouldn't just miss the outhouse. But I guess the assumption we're going with is either they're not as omnipresent as I thought it was, or they just would never have assumed someone would have used the outhouse to bathe, sleep and dream, all that business. So, yeah, I guess it is what it is. There was another thing. A few people commented, I can't remember actually the specific comment either I or the game made. We know that Haruaki got passed over for a role that first game. And it would seem that the old man is a kind of a special case. But here's my question: didn't the old man become a badger once in one of the games? Or am I crazy? Am I completely misremembering? If I've got that wrong, then just feel free to just ignore me. But I get the feeling that he was the badger in one of our games. And if that's the case, what does that mean for his selection in terms of this sort of lottery system Haruaki has developed? Is it that he does normally get a role, the old man that is? Or does it mean he doesn't initially get a role, but then later, like, everyone else can apply for a badger role? I don't know. I don't know how that works. Again, that's dependent on whether or not he was ever actually a badger. Like, was it in Wit? I think it was in Wit, where didn't he try to claim to be the spider or something, and we thought that meant he was the badger? I don't know. Maybe I'm misremembering. So, I don't know. Anyway, let's move on. I want to hear this old guy's story about what's going on, and I'm sure you do too. So, let us recommence there, shall we? Okay, let's do this. Let us hear the old man's story. Old wolf guy story, excuse me. We want to make sure we get his title correct. His story could be summed up like this. He was indeed the culprit. A serial killer who'd killed about 10 people in the incident back in the 1940s. Again, I have no idea why I conflated 1940s with earlier 1900s. However, the one who had this idea was Tochitanishi, the one who'd get executed. Tochitanishi was a Kamo Fujiyoshi person sent to Yasumizu, and though he wasn't the violent sort, being sent to Yasumizu left a deep-seated grudge. Yeah, that's what I initially suspected. He constantly grumbled about it, and couldn't get used to life here no matter what. He was an outcast to everyone except the old wolf guy. Oh, why didn't I make the connection before? This is silly of me. Do you remember last time? I mean, you probably do. It was just last episode. Didn't I make a whole part of my ramble? Didn't I talk about how? Why would the people of Kamo Fujiyoshi, the head families, why would they go this far? Why would they turn it into, rather than a method of control, into an extermination campaign? What if it's just revenge for this? That could be a reason. That's in the relatively recent history. Okay, well, I don't think that's an explanation for everything. That's actually, there's a motive there now. That makes sense. Of course, we have to hear more. He was an outcast to everyone except the old wolf guy. Tochitanishi often told him on the outskirts of Yasumizu that he'd get back at Kamo Fujiyoshi eventually.
それを俺は煽ったのよ。やりゃあええ。好きにすりゃあええ。それだけ繰り返してな。
If that had really been all he'd done, then Tochitani had been pretty murderous to begin with. It was bad enough that he'd actually went through with his feeble-minded friend's idea. Anyway, that led to the plan, if you could call it that, to kill as many Kamo Fujiyoshi people as possible. Now, on the day it was time to kill, the old wolf guy had given Tochitani lots of divine sake he'd stolen from the hall. Once they were drunk, they both covered themselves in Saranaga's mud and moved out. I asked if it had something to do with the Fujiyoshi myths. Sorry. And the answer was yes. It matched what I learned in the Nosato mansion, that the origin of the Yomibito legends was the Yasumizu rebels. The old wolf guy was probably the reason why an ex-Kama Fujiyoshi person found out about Yasumizu's legend so quickly. Okay, I do remember questioning this. I thought the story would just be known among Kama Fujiyoshi, but I guess it's known more in Yasumizu? Okay. Anyway, Tochitani, still drunk and looking like a Yomibito, began the massacre. The old wolf guy, covered in mud himself, secretly watched as he stole valuables from the places. He mentioned that the burglary was his main objective. Since he didn't want to leave any evidence and wanted to make it seem like the massacre was the goal, he only took the bills from wallets as well as various envelopes. I had a hard time deciding whether using a mass murder to get rich was subtle or blunt. Though, at that moment, something he didn't expect happened.
これがな、面白いもんでな。俺らの姿見たやつら、みんなビビって、小便垂れて、腰抜かしやがる。誰も抵抗なんざしねえ。なら、やってみようか。どうせみんな、あいつのせいになるならよ。そう思うが、人ってもんだろうが。あら、面白かったぞ、わけえの。
No comment. The fact that no one resisted was related to the absolute loyalty and the faith that the Nosato looked into. The God problem. Anyway, he went on to kill over a dozen people, steal lots of valuables, and escape before things escalated. Okay, so that would, that definitely points to, yeah, because I had wondered, whether fanaticism, how, I mean, obviously it played some part, but exactly how much of a role did the fanaticism play in what happened with this feast? And so if the fact that just the regular people of Kama Fujiyoshi are... the thought... how do I explain this? I was wondering, what's the percentage between sort of the cynical side of things of them creating the religion versus actual belief? And it appears, I mean, I think we're talking about just regular people in Kama Fujiyoshi, so maybe it's just the head families who, like specifically maybe just the Miguruma and, obviously the Nosato, guys found out too. But maybe it's just them who know the part that was invented, and maybe just the common people of Kama Fujiyoshi believe it just as much as the Yasumizu people do. Does that make sense? I hope that made sense. As he washed off the mud, returned to his place, and looked through his spoils, he found something really noteworthy. It was a piece of paper he'd found inside an envelope with money. He quickly understood what it meant, and it was huge. Tochitani escaped, turned himself into the police in Tokyo, claiming it was all his doing, and the story ended with the execution.
やつは昇進のケチでの。酔いが覚めたら、自分がしたことを恐ろしゅうなったんじゃ。どうせが。じゃが、逃げる根性だけは、座っとったな。
However, while the national reports on the serial killing subsided, things had started to change within Fujiyoshi. The village heads and their associates had begun visiting Yasumizu more and more often. And, for unknown reasons, more and more people were sent to Yasumizu. And a while later, a real feast of the Yomi Purge began. The old wolf guy hadn't participated in many conversations in Yasumizu, so he only found this out during the first feast. Apparently, the Miguruma had been acting shady, and it was because they were searching for something. Really? Is it all going to be this paper that he found? The something was stolen from one of the murder scenes. They talked that it might have been something necessary for their rituals, like a talisman or something. They'd even speculated that the old kami returned because it was lost. As the rumor mill churned, the old wolf guy was the only one who knew the truth. It was the thing he'd found, and it was something that'd be bad for the Miguruma. What was it?
何だったんです
Yeah,
それは
don't leave us in suspense.
人界の証文の写しよ。
Uh-huh. Yeah, I'd say that'd be pretty bad for them. Does this have anything to do with the, Uematsu?
人身売買それは当時は
Oh my goodness. Well, maybe that's a sad thing to read. Okay, maybe, okay.
おうとも珍しくもねえこった。じゃが身車が人を飼っておるなど誰も知らんかった。
どういうことです
飼った人間がどこにもいねえ。そもそもやらす仕事もねえ。どこで何をしとる？
Were they sent to Yasumizu?
ろくでもない儀式だか実験だかで消費したってことですか
No, this is something different. Okay.
おうさえとるなわけの。なんぞ知らんが人聞きのええ事情じゃなかろうもんよ。そんなもんは身車みてえな家は一と漏れるのを嫌うもんじゃ。
Now don't tell me this is gonna lead to they made actual werewolves. Is that in the cards? Are we getting Frankenstein up in here? What's the deal?
じゃから宴なんつう茶番をぶちよった。そうしてりゃ怖くもなんともねえ。へへ。
What does that mean? They started it so that they would have... That meant that the old wolf guy was the only one who knew that the phenomena that started it all were just a Miguruma conspiracy. It'd have been bad for them if the scandal spread throughout Fujiyoshi. It could potentially undermine both the local faith and their influence. They frantically debated how to preserve their secret and with it their authority. If you looked at it from a certain angle, it was to prevent another Yomibito rebellion. So, the main cause of this was basically God again. I saw how it was now. Anyway, the old wolf guy knew the truth. Thus, he'd used his guile, got into his target's head, and tried to figure out what they were doing. That was how he found this waterway.
水路が埋まっとるなんざ誰でも知っとる。じゃがそれは上藤吉が管理をしとる。借り物っちゅうわけよ。じゃから安水の門は それがどんなもんか知らん。考えもせん。それでも見つけたもんはもちろんぶち殺されよったじゃろうが、俺はな、ちゃんとな、段取りを踏んだ。
That was the core of the matter. He'd somehow established contact with Amiguruma, and told them that he had the contract, and that it'd go public if he died. They didn't want that. They had to ensure his safety. He'd used the info as a hostage to protect himself. It was an action movie plot, but could it work in real life? Fujiyoshi was a small village. If he'd asked someone here to reveal the truth if he died, they could just take care of that in person too. Or they could just take care of that person too. I asked about that, and he said that he had a contact in Tokyo. This is when I found out that he wasn't born in Yasumizu. He was probably like me, who tried to move to Yasumizu. He'd arrived here as a drifter and got sent there. He was pure evil, a scumbag who'd come here just to deceive people and commit terrible acts. Which, funnily enough, I wonder if he'll mention it. Haruaki played this part during the wolf route. Anyway, the villains and the prey villain met to create a villainous pact. Every year he went outside the village and secretly reached out to his contact in Tokyo. If he didn't show up even once, his contact would reveal the Miguruma's secret to the public. And if they didn't want that, they had to keep him alive. Of course, I had questions. What would have happened if the wolf guy died a natural death? Or if the Miguruma became unable to keep their end of the deal because the leader changed or something? In response to that, he said that it was a battle of wits. The Miguruma weren't actually certain that the old wolf guy's death would mean that their secret would come out. They probably didn't think that his weapon had survived a whole 60 years and made it to the modern era. Also, it was a question whether such an old scandal would deal much damage to the modern Miguruma. They were still afraid of the worst-case scenarios, though. To allay their fears and buy more time, they left the old man alive. It was a small price to pay for their feeling of safety. If it cost anything more, though, he'd have been removed a long time ago. Old wolf guy's own words. It showed a skill at negotiating particular to villains, and he was proud of it.
わかりました。つまりあなたは宴の主と密約を交わした。だからこんな場所に入っても許される。さらには宴の掟に反した行動をとっても汚れは免除される。そういうことだったんですね。
おお、面白い話だろうが、おめえだけじゃ。これまでにこの話を俺に聞いてきたのはよ。
He whispered that and then drank some rotten booze. How was I to process this? That it was possible to negotiate with the Miguruma? No way. Like he said, his deal was only accepted because of how small a price they were paying. They'd never agree to stop the Feast of the Yomi Purge. They wouldn't tolerate my goal. I could only achieve it by making an enemy of them. In fact, stopping the feast wasn't even my ultimate goal at this point. That meant that this time, the only thing I'd gained was physical protection in the form of an underground waterway. Oh, there was another thing. I realized that I couldn't let my guard down around this person. That was good enough for me.
それでいつ聞くんですか？
ああ？
どうせ僕に飲ませた酒には毒でも盛ったんでしょ？
何を言うとる？
とぼけないでくださいよ。あなたの保身が安い？そんなわけないじゃないですか。いつ約束を破るかわからないイカれた悪人を生かしておくなんて、まともな悪人ならやるわけがない。 どうせその辺のやり取りはまともな仲介者でも立てて双方後腐れなく終わってるはずだ。そしてあなたが宴で生かされるには別の理由があるはずだ。あなたの生存が彼らの計画に役立つ理由が。例えば見ちゃいけないもの、入っちゃいけない場所、そういうものに触れたものを片付けるとかね。
Having cameras wasn't enough. You also needed an on-site operator to dole out punishments. Otherwise, you'd have to send out people every time it happened. Interesting. Okay. So we talked about a spy. Maybe he's the spy. And it was better if less people knew about these dark happenings. In that case, it was best to leave the protection of Yasumizu's secret to Yasumizu's trader. What did I just say? It was best to leave the protection of the secret to Yasumizu's trader. Basically. Basically. He was... Wait, what?
毒なんざ持ってねえよ。ちーと慣れてねえやつがしびれるぐれえだ。
I couldn't stand up. I couldn't feel my legs, and it wasn't because I'd been sitting for too long. As I tried not to let it show on my face, he started rummaging through the garbage.
まあ、後でええか。
He took out something I could never forget. It was the mask piece of the wolf outfit. After tossing it aside, he put his hand in another mountain of trash and took out something else. It was a dagger.
わけえの、おめえもよ、俺と似たような悪人の面しとる。ようよう見とる。ようようわかっとる。さぞかし外じゃやりたい放題暴れたんじゃろ。そんでちーとくたびれて逃げてきたか。おめえは俺の若え時にそっくりだ。
Oh, how I wanted him to spare me that shit.
まあじゃが諦め。この村はもう俺でたくさんだ。
He was right.
さてさて、8年ぶりの人殺しじゃ。
8 years. So I think that confirms that he was previously a wolf, right? Or,
あなた
Yeah.
8年前狼だったな。
Nice. Okay.
あら、面白かった。
その時までに確実に葬っていた狼は何人いました？
狼3匹のうちせがれだけよ。カラスのわしには分かった。
Yeah, so the other was Gensan and Old Wolf Guy. Yep. In the feast 8 years ago, the mist cleared, with only one of the wolves dead. If Gensan, the one who knew about the badger, was one, then the third one had to be around 2. It wasn't guaranteed that it was a wolf guy, but as it turned out, the truth was always the worst possible option.
最後に一つ聞きたい。あなたは神様とは会ったか？
He had to have. It didn't matter that he was an outsider. Even Kaori-san, who came here from Tohaku, had been infected by it. He couldn't have been an exception to that. If he really was a scumbag like me, admitting that he'd submitted to a god must have been an extremely humiliating thing for him. He didn't reply.
ここは神様の庭ですよ。それだけ悪知恵が回るなら、あなたは遠くに逃げるべきだった。あなたに未来はない。
I hoped that my words would help me get back at him a little. I didn't want to completely lose this time, but... He laughed.
わけのいいか、ここは神の庭なんかじゃねえ。俺の砦だ。どこへ逃げようがよ、てめえの砦より安全な場所はねえんだよ。守るには砦がいる。侍の頃と何にも変わらねえ。そんなことも知らねえもんが神なんざ形のねえもんにすがって怯えんだよ。
それじゃあ
The numbness was starting to get to my lips.
あなたは一度も神様に怯えたことなどなかったとでも。
神なんざ怖くねえ。
There was no fakery in his words.
人が作ったもんなら殺せる。
He said that and swung down the blade.
未来はねえと言ったな、わけの。俺はもう95じゃ。未来がどうと、今死ぬもんに言われても、笑うしかねえわな。
Oh, he had a point. I'd really underestimated him. He was right. You needed a place for protection. And then there was his idea that you could kill God. His serpentine wisdom had let him survive for several decades all by himself. He really was pure evil. The evil I discovered many loops ago was incomparable to him. He was a true villain. Well, I really didn't mind what happened here. His fate was to die at the hands of Chemi or Kanzo-san, one of the foolish Yasumizu people he so looked down upon. I had no reason to tell him that, but it really was humiliating to die at the hands of such a cartoonish villain. Okay. Number 1. The old man who cried wolf turned out to be the killer behind the Fujiyoshi murder 60 years ago. He colluded with the Muiguruma to assist in the progression of the Feast of the Yomi Purge. Behavior side, I learned some things from him. I learned some things from the pure evil that dwells within him. First of all, I need a fortress in order to survive, and most importantly, the concept that God can be killed. Not just that God can be killed, but that God was created by humans. So that's quite something. Okay, so let me try to... There's a few things I'm curious about. Maybe you guys can clear this up for me. So was Haruaki suggesting in his thoughts there, was he suggesting that the old wolf guy is the creature that, remember there's a progression at night where first the bringers of corruption will try to get you, but if they don't get you, then this werewolf comes and attacks you and kills you. Without fail. We know that Chiemi and Haruaki they had tried many, many times to escape, and presumably Chiemi claimed that she could shoot and kill the Bringers of Corruption, but she was never able to do it to the werewolf. Is Haruaki thinking that the werewolf is the old man who cried wolf? Because the scene with the werewolf popped up when he mentioned that. But how can that be? I don't know, that seems strange to me. I mean, considering the fact that, like, Chiemi has killed the old wolf guy before. What would him being in a wolf costume do that makes him suddenly invincible and able to kill us every time? I don't know. And then the other thing I'm curious about and may need correction on is I mean, after I'm gonna go back and watch through this again at some point. So this is just my initial confusion here. Did that story suggest that the Miguruma started the original Feast of the Yomi Purge, the modern Feast of the Yomi Purge, the first one that happened during World War II? They did that specifically to try and find the notes regarding the human trafficking. Is that right? So I guess my question is, why would they continue doing it after getting into contact with the old wolf guy and learning he had it? What would the point be to continuing the feast then? I don't know. Or at least continuing the modern Feast of the Yomi Purge, because we know there are older feasts that occurred that were not the same as the modern ones were. Yeah, and just another big impression I got was that the Miguruma just sound like they're all a bunch of Frankensteins, where they are apparently conducting experiments and as well as rituals, and maybe they created God and the werewolves. I don't know. It's just, holy cow, a lot got dropped on us just now. Okay. Yeah, we can do the hint corner, I think. Bad ending number 1.
Yattara Taisho. 最後の鍵の一つ、キー1をゲットだ。一番入手が面倒なキーだぜ。これでもうあったも同然だな。
Oh, well, that just makes me feel so good there, sheep.
今回のバッドエンド1、題してジジイの母校せず響き渡る中で斬死についてだが、冒頭から空欄だった1番がようやく埋まるってわけだ。ほぼ最後じゃねえか。たく凝った構成にしやがって。
I'm curious now, actually. Do we have any left? Oh my goodness. We have all the keys. Incredible.
ついにここまで謎のレールに包まれてたジジイの正体が明らかになったわけだ。ボケてねえことはずっと前から予想されていたが、それも証明されたわけだ。いやー、本性はとんでもねえ悪人だったな。しかし春明はジジイから命と引き換えに重要な着想を得たようだ。まあ、どうもまたろくでもねえ着想みてえだけどな。つうわけで、順の通りに来てりゃ、ここで最後の鍵が5つ揃ってるはずだ。まだの大将は、5、7の、9、過ごし方は、で、最後のキーを拾ってやってくれ。そんで、揃ったなら、6、暗黒の、9、絶望するかに飛んでやってくれ。
6 darkness, Q despair, huh?
そして 絶望以外の答えを突きつけろ。いや、本当は俺が言うのはいろいろおかしいんだがよ。本編の俺はブチギレてっから。
Uh-oh. I don't remember where this choice is. Is it going to be after we... Oh, is this the one after we summon the monster? This could be very bad, actually.
まあ、そこんところはインターフェースキャラだからってことで勘弁してくれ。よし、今回はここまで。次も元気に死んでこい。そういう夢だったってわけだ。次はもっとうまくやれ。羊が1匹、羊が2匹。
As I was... Wait, this is different. I actively thought to myself for the first time. It seemed that was enough. It seemed the plan had finally come together. At the end of a long, long loop, I saw a brilliant light. All that was left was to meet with that person. Ooh. Well, considering... I think we have to go all the way down. Oh boy. Yeah, we are there. Okay, so obviously we're going to be starting here. Yeah, I'm going to be calling it for today. Okay, I need to go back over that whole conversation again because I don't think I fully comprehended everything that was being said there. Miguruma are apparently conducting experiments, human experiments. Not sure I had that on my bingo card, but, you know, alright. God was created, and God can be killed. No explanation on the giant creature yet. Don't know what that's about. Yeah, so if anyone wants to sort of correct me or try and make me understand those couple questions I had earlier, I think I'd appreciate it. It's just, yeah. Yeah, and just basically he's the old wolf guy is just, as Haruaki himself said, he's cartoonishly evil. What else was there? No, I guess that's pretty much it. I mean, the Miguruma are supposedly really good on intelligence. You'd think they'd because he needs to go to Tokyo once a year, right? You'd think they'd tail him. I mean, they have this surveillance network. Well, we don't know how recent the surveillance network is, right? Presumably at some point between around the last feast, 8 years ago? And my idea is you'd think at least at one point they would tail him to Tokyo, you know, and then discover who his contact was, and then, I don't know, maybe they'd do something. I don't know. This whole thing seems a bit much to me. In a way I cannot very precisely describe at the moment. Okay, I'm going to stop rambling on, and I'm going to call it here. I've been the Worm. This has been Raging Loop, and I hope to see you next time. I mean, are we going to... You know, obviously don't tell me, but am I just going to get to the end next time? That seems crazy, but I don't know. Huh. Well, I guess we'll find out together, all right? Anyway, I hope you're doing all right. See you next time.